Hakalosh Boker Or Masechet Nazir Daf Amud Aleph 56a1. We finished off yesterday by asking a very interesting question. Mativ Rami Bar Chama, this is Nun Hamud Bet. We said that Rami Bar Chama came and he asked the following question: Nazir, that he was Tameh B'Safek, Muchlat B'Safek. Now remember, here we have a Vadai. What's the Vadai? The Vadai is that he's a Nazir. So Nazir Vadai cannot come and Misafek start cutting off his hair. But now he was mitameh b'safek, meaning that we don't know if be'emet he was tameh or not. Plus, he was muchlat b'safek, which means that he became a metzorah b'safek. So says the Gemara, Nunvav Amud Aleph, ochel bekodashim la'achar 60 yom. He could only eat kodashim after 60 days and not before then, because basically, because of the surfek tumah metzorah until 60 days, because the metzorah is not going to be tahor until he cuts off all his hair. Since he's for sure a nazir, and he's only a safek metzorah, he cannot cut off his hair misafek, right? And to be getting out of the safek, each time he needs a tiglachat of 30 yom, right? But then mimarashach, it's going to be good. Because if he was mitameh, he has to cut off all his hair. If not, so then he has his nezirut. So it comes out, in order to do 2 tiglachats, right, of the metzorah, you have to wait 60 days. And then he's outside of the metzorah, and he's allowed to eat the kodshim. However, though, he has to do another 2 tiglachats. Because if he was becoming tameh, he needs another tiglachat, and another tiglachat when he finishes in the zirut. So therefore, even though between one tiglachat and another, you need 60 days. So in order to get out of all the sfekot, you need, right, arba tiglachot, right, le-120 yom. Yeah, 4 times 30 days. Yeah, you understand how we got to that? No, one more time. Yeah, one more time. This person was a Nazir. He became a Tameh Misafek, and he's a Metzorah Misafek. So he needs to do, right? He needs to cut off his hair. Yeah, he needs to cut off all his hair at the end of the Metzorah. He needs to cut off all his hair at the end of the regular Nazirut. And he needs to cut off his hair right after the Tum'ah of Nazirut. Now, since you always have to wait 30 days in between each time, so you're going to have to wait, right? You're going to have to wait 4 times 30 days. Let's see over here. It says, Tiglachat Rishona, you have to wait 30 days, because maybe he did not become tameh at all, and a Nazir Tahor is not allowed to cut off the hair. So at the end of the 30 days, he cuts off his hair, mimanavshach. If he's Tahor legamre, if he's pure 100%, so therefore it's Tiglachat Teorah. And if he's a Mitzorah, this is the Tiglachat Rishona of the Mitzorah. Now, if he's Tamemet and he's not a Mitzorah, this is Tiglachat of the Nazir Tameh. Okay? Now, even though the Tiglachat Hashniya, you need to wait 30 days, right? And not like a regular Mitzorah, which is 7 days, because maybe he's not a Mitzorah, and maybe he was Tamemet. So therefore, the Tiglachat Rishona was Tiglachat Tumah, so he didn't do the Nazirut Ta'ara yet. So he's not allowed to cut off his hair. So the end of the next 30 days, in Manavshach, he could do another tiglachat. If he's a mitzorah, there's a tiglachat shniya of the mitzorah. And if he's tamemet and not a mitzorah, he has to be migalech now because of tiglachat teorah. Okay? Now he comes and he says, after you did the first 2, you still can't do it a third time, because maybe mitzorah, the days of the mitzorah do not count for the days of Nazirut, as we brought that in our Mishnah. So therefore now you have to do Yemei Nazirut. Now you have a safek, maybe he did not become tameh, and he's still in a Nazir tahor, where you're not allowed to cut off your hair. So therefore, he has to wait another 30 days mimanavshach. If he was a mitzorah and also tameh, there's tiglachat nazir tameh. And if he was not tamemet, so there's tiglachat nazir tahor. And if he wasn't a mitzorah and not a tamemet, so he's not a nazir. Therefore, he's allowed to cut off his hair. And then again, he needs the last 30 days, because if he was a mitzorah and also a tameh, right? It comes, he already did the tiglachat of the tum'ah, and now he has to do the lashlim nazirut ta'ara, and therefore he has to wait until the end of 30 days. So that's why you have basically the 120 days, basically, 4 times 30 days. Okay? It's an incredible case, because think about, like, each one contradicts the other. Meaning, if he's a Nazir Tahor, he cannot come and start cutting off his hair for a safek on each one. The mitzad sheni, if he's tameh, so he has to do it right away. But since he's tahor, he has to finish the 30 days. So he has to wait until the end of the 30 days to cut off his hair. Now maybe he's tameh, so therefore it didn't help for the tahor, and he has to start again. You know, like it's mamash, like each one, right, is like okay. The shotei yain, he's going to drink wine. And then he's going to be able to. So basically, what do we just say? The kochim he cannot eat until after 60 days, because after the 60 days he already got out of the mitzorah, right? And therefore there's no problem. So after 60 days he could already come and eat the kochim, okay? Because the nazir could eat kochim, right? It's just a mitzorah canon. But the yain and letameh lemetim is only after 120 days. V'tani alam we learned. But one of these words, benizirut muetet, only if there was a 30-day nazirut. Aval benizirut bat shana. But if it was going to be nazirut bat shana, ochel bakochim lachar shte shanim, you're going to eat kochim after 2 years. V'shotei yain, you're going to drink wine. Umetameh lemetim lachar arba shanim, you're going to be metameh lemetim after 4 years. Okay? Now, v'isal kadai tachif, you're going to tell me now, salkin leyome. What does salkin leyome means? That the yemet tumah v'metzorah are going to count for nezirut. Tiskele b'shalosh shanim u'shloshim yom. Because here, what are we trying to say? He cannot come and cut off his hair in the middle of nezirut. So if he did a nezirut bat shana of 1 year, he could only eat kochim after 2 years and drink wine and do all these things after 4 years. Why? Because he cannot take a haircut in the middle because of the safek in the middle of the nezirut. So he has to wait between the tiglachat and the tiglachat a full year for each of the doubts. One more time, each one of these things was a doubt, right? He was a safek tumah. It wasn't a vadai tumah. Safek tumah, safek metzorah. Now the halacha is that if he's a safek, he cannot take away from a vadai. So let's say he was in the first year and he became safek metzorah and safek tumah. So remember, safek tum'ah itself, 100% tum'ah, annuls the nezirut. You have to start again. But since it was a safek, he can't cut off his hair in the first year because it was only a doubt, and a doubt cannot take away from him for sure. So he has to finish that year. But once he finishes that year, now he comes and he shaves off the head, right? After the year. Why? Because maybe he was a nazir taor. So he comes and shaves off the head. But maybe be'emet he was not. Maybe he was be'emet tameh. We don't know. It's safek. So now he has to wait another full year. He cannot just wait 30 days and cut off his hair again. He has to wait a full year, because if he was a tameh in the middle, it annulled the entire nezirut of the entire year. Because remember, nezirut tameh destroys everything. And now he needs a second year. Because maybe Bemet he was tameh, he cut off his hair, and now he needs a full year of nezirut now. So again, he's going to have to do a full year. And the same thing with the mitzorah. So each one is causing that he needs, again, another full year. So it comes out that now it's going to come out that he's going to need 4 years. He could only eat kochim after 2 years, because that was like the 60 days. But to drink wine, he needs 4 years, just like you needed after 120, because you needed 4 sets. Okay?
If you're sure that it's tameh.
Another question. Ravashi asked another question. This is only going to be the days of tum'ah, that it's not going to count to him towards the minyan. But he says yemei chiluto minayin. What about yemei chiluto, which means the days that he's actually closed? That they're not going to. How do we know that it's not going to count him for the nezirut? So says the Gemara, meaning that we're talking about that he was before that it was nitma, it doesn't count, right? So since he destroys the first ones, it's fine. But here, maybe I met one of the mukhlat that he is actually 100% metzorah. Maybe it does count. So says it's kavachomen. He made tuma megaleach or maybe korban. If right now tumat met, he has to cut off all his hair and he has to bring a korban. Yemechiluto megaleach. So too, when he's going to be a metzorah, he's going to take off all his hair and maybe korban. Just like yemetumato does not count, so yemechiluto should not count. So says Gemara, no, it's not true. Imamarta bimetumato. When do we speak about yemetuma? Sheken mevatel ba'en et hakodmim, because tum'ah annuls everything that happened beforehand. Tomar b'mechiluto shemetet, but mitzorah does not. Meaning, tum'ah hayamim rishonim yipelu. It cancels everything out. Person became tameh, cancels everything out. By yemechaluto, which is basically by the, how do you call this? By the mitzorah, it doesn't take off everything beforehand. You're right. When he shaves off his hair, he has a technical issue. He has to wait 30 days in order to make sure that the hair is long enough to cut off when he's a nazir. But it doesn't destroy everything that he did beforehand. If he became a mitzorah after 40 days, and he still has to wait until 100. All he has to do is he shaves off all his hair, and then he waits another 30 minimum. As long as he had the 30 days minimum, he's fine. It doesn't destroy everything that he did previously. So says the Gemara, Amarta kal v'chomer u'ma nazir bekeved, right? Shese'aro ra'ui le'tiglach ha'nezirut. If somebody's mekabel elav nezirut in the middle of a bet hakvarot, in the middle of a cemetery, he says he wants to become a nazir. When he's tameh, he does not have any yamim kodmim which is soter. He doesn't have previous days which he annuls, right? That his hair is already fitting for tiglach ha'nezirut ta'ara. Because basically immediately once he comes out of the bet hakvarot, they have to sprinkle onto him the paraduma and everything, and then he starts counting the nezirut ta'ara even without tiglachat. He doesn't cut off his hair now, right? Because basically there was nothing what to count to start cutting off his hair. So it comes out, right, that the shiur that we said during the time of the neder was when he finishes the nezirut. So enolin lo min aminyan yemechi loto she'en saror tiglachat nezirut, but the days that he was a metzorah, that they're not fitting for tiglachat nezirut. Lo koshkan shouldn't it be that it's not going to count for him? So says the Gemara, but that's only going to be during the time that he's going to be a mitzorah for sure. Yemei sefiro. How do we know that when he's counting between the two different haircuts, right? How do we know? Minayin. How do we know that it's not going to count? Right? So he comes and he says, a mitzorah is not allowed to eat kodshim until after he brings the korbanot, and after 6 days, he already did 2 haircuts, and he brings his korbanot. Right, because he does 2 haircuts. So he says, the dinu, it's a kal vachomer. Look at Vav Amubet, 56b. Ma yemechiluto, just like yemechiluto, taun tiglachat, you need a tiglachat when it becomes pure. So to Yemesifiro, also when he's counting, also at the end, also he needs it, right? Just like Yemechiluto does not count Minyan. So to Yemesifiro does not count from Minyan. So says the Gemara, Yachol, I would have thought to say Af Yemehezgero also when you close him up, meaning even before deciding that he's a Metzorah, right? Remember, there's Yemehezger, Sagur, and Yemech Chalut means Achlata, Muchlat. You decided he's a Metzorah. Yemehezgero, Yemehezgero is you don't know if he's a mitzorah, so you close him up. You close him up for 7 days to make sure whether he's a mitzorah or not. So he says, I would have thought to say, so also Yemeskero is the same halacha, v'wadin v'adin noten, and it's like a kavachomer that it's not going chalut metamim mishkav mushav. Just like somebody that's 100% a nazir, it's going to be metamim mishkav mushav, right? It's going to be metamim anything that they lie down upon or sit upon. V'yemeskero metamim mishkav mushav, and the days of the skero is going to be metamim mishkav mushav. Im lamata l'mechiluto shel minyan, if you may skiro en minyan. Amarta, you said no. Im amarta b'mechiluto sheken chiluto taun tiglachat. We said that the chiluto you need to cut off your hair and you bring a korban. That's why it doesn't count. But b'mei skiro you don't need a tiglachat, you don't need a korban at all. So that's why it's going to count. Meaning, if you were only put into a safek of a nazir, of a mitzorah, sorry, and then at the end you weren't a mitzorah, you don't have to do anything. Right? They locked you up for 7 days, but after 7 days, that's it. From here we learn, so he says, Zav, Zava, the days of the Zav and Zava, and the closing up of Metzorah, they do count for Nezirut, but not Yemesifiro or when you finish of a real Metzorah. Though we learned, Lo, that no, that it's going to be batel everything that happened beforehand. So, but what are we talking about? If you're talking about Nezirut Mu'etet of 30 days, you need Gidul Se'ad. You always need that the hair is going to grow long, right? But rather what? The Nezirut Murba. We're talking about that you took upon yourself a longer Nezirut. We said you're not going to learn. It's not going to count as the days. So you said from here, it's not going to count. Shema Minas, you're right. So basically, this is actually teaching us, not like Rav Chasta, that the days of the Sefirah or the Megumro of Metzorah do not count even in Nezirut Murubah. Meaning, when does it count the Metzorah? Only if it's a doubt. If it's a Metzorah for sure, the days of the counting or the days that he was for sure a Metzorah do not count for the Nezirut.
And after we saw that he was a Metzorah.
Says the Mishnah, Vav Amubet, 56b. Says the Mishnah, Mar Rabbi Elazar. Says Rabbi Elazar, Mishum Mishua Danim Mishua. Kol Tum'at Minamet Shnazir Megaleach Alav. any tumah from the met, then the Nazir has to cut off his hair. If you came into the Bet HaMikdash tameh and you did it b'mezid, you're going to be chayav karet. If you did it in shogeg, you're korban lev yored. Now, if you're tameh with one of the tumot, we just spoke about before. You remember we spoke about all the tameh and tumah of the Nazir. If he comes into the house, if he does this, if he does all those tumot, it's exactly the need for the Bet HaMikdash. The whole tumah min hamet she'ena nazir, any tumah min hamet that the Nazir does not cut off his hair, right? Which is basically, the dofek or the quarter of the cup of the tzamot of the bones and all those things. And chayavim lo b'midash. You're not going to be chayav in the Bet HaMikdash. Rabbi says lo tezu kala min hasheretz. The Nazir, right, is not going to be megaleach on a sheretz, which means even if he was nitma from a sheretz, which was one of the 8 creepy crawlers, which is a tumah kala, you are going to be chayav on Bet HaMikdash. And koshken tumah min hamet, right, that needs any type of sprinkling of the paraduma, the 3rd and the 7th day, right, you're going to be chayav, even though the Nazir is not going to come and cut off his hair. So Rabbi Meir argues on what we just on Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar just said in the name of Yoshua that everything depends on the Nazir. Meaning, if the Nazir cuts off his hair, tumah Bet HaMikdash. If the Nazir does not cut off his hair, there's no tumah of the Bet HaMikdash. Meaning, if he came into the Bet HaMikdash, even though he had this tumah of the other things, he's going to be okay. He's not going to be chayav. Says Rabbi Meir, it's not true. What about a sheretz? So says the Gemara, the Rabbi Elazar mishum Rabbi Yoshua gamalla. So 1 second, where did he learn it from? He probably learned it from the Lashon Mishnah. I thought he learned it from Yoshua bar Gamal. The title was learned right to Amar Rabbi Elazar. When I came to Ardaskia, Matzati Yoshua ben Peter Rosh. I found Rabbi Yoshua ben Peter Rosh. That was the name of his father. Okay. Shaya Yoshev v'dan lifnei Rabbi Meir b'halacha. That he was sitting in front of Rabbi Meir and daning b'halacha. And they said, right? Yeah, it's like a Peter. Yeah.
No, Fisher is on this.
Yeah. No, but that's because it's Ashkenaz. Yeah, he says, Kol tumah min hamet shenazir megaleach alav chayvim mishum b'hamikdash. Chut v'shalom en chayvim b'hamikdash. Amar lo says Rabbi Meir to Yoshua ben Peter Rosh. Al tezu kala misheretz. Amarti lo. I told him, Kluma tabaki b'Rabbi Yoshua bar Mamal. Or do you even know who he is? Amar li hen. He told me yes. Says Rabbi Elazar to Rabbi Meir, yes. Kach amar li Yoshua ben Mamal mishum Yoshua. Chut v'shalom mishum b'hamikdash. Chut v'shalom min hamet shenazir megaleach alav en chayvim mishum b'hamikdash. So you see that he learned it from Yoshua bar Mamal. So says the Gemara, Amru, they said, Shema Mina, we learn from here. Kol shmatata demitamra b'vetlata, any halacha that was said by 3 chachamim, the third one heard it from the second, and the second from the third one, Hadmayu batrae amrinan, metziai lo amrinan. You only say the last one and the first one. You don't have to say the middle one. You understood? Meaning, I learned something from my rabbi, and my rabbi learned something from his rabbi. Yeah? So all I have to do, now you learned it from me. All you have to do is say the last one that you heard it from, and the first one, not the middle one. That's what we just learned from me, because that's what just happened here. He skipped out the middle one, right? And now why? Because of this. So we also learned it. Question is why? Let me just see if it says anything. He says this is the pshat of Omer Davar B'Shem Omro. We're not makpidim to mention the middle people, but sometimes we are makpidim even to mention middle people. He brings down different places, but basically he was just saying that this is also considered that you said in the name of the Omro, because you basically said the Mesoret, and even if you cut it, you skipped somebody out, there's still a Mesoret going on. It's still going on like with the tradition.
Because if the intermediate has
Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak says of Nachman bar Yitzchak Kafanana Mitzanim, we also learned it. Amar Nachum Alavlar, the Mishnah Peh says Nachum Alavlar said, Kach mekulam Rabbi Yoshia b'shegibeh me'aba. This is what I accepted from Rabbi Miyasha, that he accepted from his father. Shekibeh min hazugot, that he accepted from the zugot, which are basically they goes up until Hillel v'Shamai. That there was always a zug, there was always like an Abedin and then a Nasi. Yeah, Shekiblu min Nevi'im halacha Moshe miSinai. They accept for the Nevi'im halacha Moshe miSinai. And then he brought down the case. Be'ilu Yoshua veKalev lo kachashina. It doesn't bring down Yoshua veKalev, meaning it goes straight to halacha Moshe miSinai and the Nevi'im. What about Yoshua? What about Kalev? Meaning after Moshe Rabbeinu came Yoshua and Kalev, and it continued going down until it got to the Nevi'im. You understand? Meaning there was something in the chain, but it didn't bring it down. So Shema Mina, that's also proof that we just brought down that as long as you basically had the last group, you could skip a group in the middle, right? And nothing's going to happen. Okay? Fine. Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Says Rabbi Akiva. Danti lifnei Rabbi Eliezer. I judged in front of Rabbi Eliezer and he said it was a kal v'chomer. Umayim etzem kisora shelo mitamei adam be'oel. If an etzem kisora is not going to be mitamei adam be'oel, Nazir megalech hamago v'maso. If a Nazir touches it, he's still going to have to cut off all his hair. Even Magav Masa. Magav Masa's touch. Remember, touching and carrying is worse than the Ohel. Ohel, right, is like, it's exactly, it's in the same. So if you touch something, it's worse than if you're in the same Ohel. So here it says, Revi'it dam, shehu mitamei adam be'ohel. What about a Revi'it of dam? That it is mitamei be'ohel, because that means it's more stricter than an etzem kisora. En odin she'en nazir megalech Magav Masa. Shouldn't it be then that the Nazir should be megalech on touching it and on carrying it? Amali told me, Maze Akiva. What is this Akiva? You don't judge from here on kal v'chomer, because we're going to explain why in the Gemara. When I came and brought in front of Yeshua, Amali told me, Yafeh Amarta. You said something beautiful. Elaken Amru, but that's what they said Hechal Moshe Sinai, which means that the only reason why we don't say that is because it's Hechal Moshe Sinai. If not, they meant like what you said was a good kal v'chomer. But I have Hechal Moshe Sinai. So once you have Hechal Moshe Sinai, you don't do kal v'chomer. We continue with Hashem tomorrow, right, with the Gemara to finish off the perek. Tomorrow or later?